Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery, and what you see here is the last of my pumpkin collection. I had a huge collection of pumpkins. I was just driving down my neighborhood street one day and I saw, this was a couple weeks after Thanksgiving had ended already. Halloween was already a month away. So these pumpkins were sitting around as decorations for those autumn, Halloween, and Thanksgiving season holidays. But once all that ended, before the first frost came around, I found this big collection of pumpkins. Every time I would chop one of these pumpkins up, I would, feed the good parts to the worms. And then I really ended up with a whole bunch of stems. So you can see all these stems here, 8 stems plus the 9th stem, by far the largest. You can see that last pumpkin that I chopped up was by far the largest of all the pumpkins. You could tell just from the size of the stem. I've even got some tomato stems down here, and as well as the stem of a grape bunch. So the reason I've got all this stuff lined up here was not so we could talk about pumpkins and how I hang on to all their seeds and make worm chow out of it. Just wanted to show you how I was preparing for today's check-in. And you might be thinking to yourself, holy cow, you got half of a huge pumpkin there, and you've got like an entire tub full of prepared bedding, and that's all shredded cardboard, leaves, all dampened, so it's got some good weight to it. The reason I've got so much stuff lined up over here is because we're going to be working on, you might have guessed, but maybe not, these buckets that we've been running as sort of red wiggler breeder bins have been sort of out of the limelight. We've been managing them off camera. However, we did check in on them 4 weeks ago, and at that point they were 8 weeks old. So now they're 4 weeks older, 12 weeks old, 84 days of age. It was 56 days of age when we last checked in on them. And these 5 buckets that need feeding today have been getting only worm chow. They've been getting fed religiously every 4 days. So every 4th day they would get a little dusting of worm chow, drop down into their environment, and they've eaten nothing else. So I think this little treat of pumpkin here is going to be really welcomed. And I think, just from the perspective of the bedding, what the game plan is, I mean, right now you'll see that the material within these bins is hardly scratching the surface as far as the capacity of the container. So I would say we're probably somewhere down under a quarter of the potential, space available in one of these buckets that's being utilized. Maybe a fifth, I don't know. So for that reason, I really wanted to use a whole bunch of this bedding that we've prepared. And we're going to use all of it. We're going to use that whole batch right there and drop it in with today's feeding along with those nice huge chunks of pumpkin. So that'll hopefully, bring the level of each of these systems up closer to halfway up to the capacity of the bucket. So that's what my game plan is. You'll even notice that I've taken the time to move the buckets right behind where I stand usually. I'm going to have to get some of this stuff out of the way so we can get to work, and we're going to get them fed. I don't want to be mean, so they're going to get a little bit of worm chow. Going forward, we might not use as much worm chow or any worm chow in the future. Just because it's the only thing they've been fed over the past 84 days doesn't mean it needs to stay that way. I thought that transitioning them to somewhat more conventional foods, like this pumpkin, would be a little bit, I don't know, perhaps more nutritious. So now, I didn't even make an attempt at calibrating things here. So I just took a shot, and we got lucky there with the alignment of the camera. Peeking down into the system, you're going to notice here in bin number 1, and bin number 1, by the way, is going to be the piece that gets that big, huge chunk of stem from the big pumpkin that I just chopped up. And then the other systems will each get 2 pieces of pumpkin stem from the collection. So this thing was still a solid piece of paper when we were in here 4 weeks ago. The worms have nibbled their way through it. And those little piles down there, I'm thinking that those are probably, to me at least, it looks like they could be mites. I don't know. In numbers like this, I think it's still tolerable, but I don't really like to have too many outbreaks or blooms of any one type of helper creature in the bins. If I've got a little bit of this, a little bit of that in there alongside the worms helping out, that's cool, but I'd like for the primary occupant in these to be worms. So this was my thought, was just to make sure that this feeding includes a little bit of worm chow, but going forward, if we're going to start giving them stuff like pumpkin and kitchen scraps and stuff like that, then maybe we'll be transitioning them. But basically, you heard what I said earlier. My aim was to pretty much add at least as much stuff that's in here already now, to kind of effectively double the use of our space, available space in here. I mean, we're certainly not going anywhere near its capacity. We're probably not even going to reach halfway full as far as this bucket's capacity is concerned, but from the perspective of what the worms have had to live in for the past 84 days, or the amount of space that they've had to live in, they're getting a pretty major upgrade. And you know, since I'm putting in a chunk of food and a bunch of fresh bedding and stuff like that, I figured I would isolate what I'm putting in today to the far end of the bin over there. Let's drop in a handful of our bedding just as a foundation, and then right after that we could come right in with the delicious pumpkin treat. Oh my goodness, so big that it barely fits past the camera. I don't think we'll have this problem in the other ones because we don't have the huge stem plus food item to contend with. We'll be able to put things in a little bit more loosely, but you know, that's going to be our, right there, that's going to be our goal, is to get that thing covered up. It doesn't have to be terribly thick, but I'd still like to see at least all of it covered up. You know, before we cover it up completely, I'm going to drop in a little bit of my pulverized eggshell too. A little bit of grit for these little guys. And, well, you know, I shouldn't be stingy because I did sort of budget probably more than a gallon per system. That was my idea as far as what would go into each of these systems as the upgrade to their available space. And now I'm almost feeling like the camera should be mounted a little bit higher. Maybe if I just clip it a little closer to the top edge, but that's what I was looking to do here today. Let's give them a little bit more, you know, because if I'm looking at what's in that tub over there and how much we've used of it, I think we've got a little bit more that we could certainly make use of, and I bet you the worms will appreciate it. You know, if what's going on down there, all that food that we just added, if that for whatever reason were to start to heat up down there, then that's fine. The worms have their original material to hang out in. Nothing's forcing them to explore that new side of the bin, basically. I got a feeling that pumpkin is gonna do what it's meant to do, which is lure them over and come explore. So I think this is going to be a nice little upgrade for these guys. I think we've definitely exceeded the halfway point. I'm just looking alongside the edge of the bucket, and I think we're pretty much there. Let's get these coverings back on because there's nothing more to do here, and we've got 4 more of these to take care of. So I don't want to dawdle. I just figured maybe I would try to reconfigure this paper a little bit so that it serves more as a top covering and less as just a big donut. This way the paper right beneath the plastic will have a tendency to get nice and damp from recirculating moisture, and then it'll eventually become stuff that the worms can nibble on. Alright, let's go get bucket number 2. This is bucket number 1, by the way, getting the big stem. Yeah, there's a good bit of weight difference here between buckets 1 and bucket 2. Here in bucket number 2, let's see, how did we get this thing to clip on here? Okay, bear with me, thank you. Similarly, we've got a chewed up top covering paper, which we can similarly reconfigure so that it once again covers a continuous section. And as we did before, we're going to treat these little guys to a little bit of worm chow piled into this nice familiar bedding material that still sort of exists in here after 84 days. A good deal of what is in here has already been transformed into worm castings, but there's definitely good amounts of bedding left over. I have not added anything. There's just the amount of material that these systems were launched off with originally. You can see a lot of it's being transformed into castings by these little guys. And there's worms throughout this stuff. If you ask me, they look happy and healthy. Uh-oh, I almost forgot the stem. So I just went ahead and I just threw one of these stems over into bucket number 1. Because I want each system to get one, and then we'll throw this one right into here. Let's use this little bit of fresh new bedding to press up against the existing material before we pile in the yummy morsel for them. Look at that. All right. What a treat. Okay. And then cover up. I don't know. To me, somehow this one does not feel as piled high. Like maybe in the other one I might have piled the existing material up a little taller. That looks more like it. And it did seem like maybe here we just covered up the pumpkin piece, but we forgot to give them a couple stems. So let's make sure we're being consistent here. I think perhaps another handful or two will get us kind of that same level as we did in the bucket number 1. Yeah, that looks about right. Let's go with just one more, and then we can give them back their top covering newspaper, top covering plastic storage bag. Oops. Okay. Yeah, there we go. I think that's about right. Back on with the coverings. And onwards to bucket number 3. All right, bucket number 3. Let's see here. So it does become a little bit repetitive. You start getting the hang of what you're trying to get done here and what to expect. I don't know. I think I'm, seeing little specks of stuff, but maybe not like a little bloom of mites like we saw in the first system there. Well, that's okay. They're just helping out. They don't cause any harm, for real, as long as their numbers are kept within check, I believe. Here it seems like we got a little bit less residual bedding material. Systems like this, I assume, are probably most in need of a good shot of bedding, so these guys are going to probably appreciate getting what they're getting today. Lots and lots of castings piling up here. This is like good timing, I think, giving these guys a little bit of space. I'm not really looking that closely, so please, if you do spot any cocoons, let me know. So I'm kind of like either, having to choose between my arm gets to go in or my face gets to peek in, see what's happening. So I'm opting to keep shoveling and piling instead of trying to give myself visibility into what I'm doing. So let's see here. Nice here. We gave maybe a little bit more of a foundational handful there. That felt a lot more than what I did in the last one. But that's okay. We'll compensate. Let's see. 1, 2. We put 1, 2 stems into the other one. We got 1, 2 here and 2 there. So I think we've got a good fair split. Let's not forget to treat them to some grit. I believe when I built these systems sat around for 4 weeks before they finally got occupied by worms. When I originally built the systems, I couldn't remember whether I had included any grit. And there's no grit in my worm chow either. So this could very well have been a gritless system, and if it did have grit, it was only grit that it got in the very, very beginning. So that grit that I use, the pulverized eggshell, I was pretty generous, or at least it felt to me like I was pretty generous, giving them some. And let's see. There we go. I'm trying to remember now. Did I give these guys worm chow? I don't know. I could be spacing out here. Let's just give them a little bit in case I forgot. Sorry, my phone just buzzed over there. Kind of drew my attention to see who was texting. but I should really concentrate on getting this job completed. So let's give them a little bit more bedding and we'll be finished here. All right. It's like, seems like it's such a simple couple things that you want to take care of each time, but when you sort of let your kind of mind wander and your attention isn't really there, you can easily start either duplicating certain steps because you forgot that you already did it, or completely space and completely leave out certain steps. So bedding, food, grit, stems, trying to be consistent here, make sure everyone gets a fair shake, and refurbished top covering. And back on with the lid. Well, not really a lid, but almost serving like a lid. These little plastic bags. Very good, very good. Onward to bucket number 4. Wow, such a difference. There's such a difference in the weight when you lift up one of these that haven't been given the upgrade, the major enhancement. So just, there we go. Just wanted to adjust the camera's angle a little bit. It seemed like it was just peering a little bit too much towards one side. Here too, if I'm not mistaken, those are probably some mites hanging out down there. Once again, this newspaper has been nibbled pretty much away in the middle section. Now it feels like I should state each thing I'm doing so that I maybe burn it into my short-term memory that I haven't forgotten something, so I don't redo it unnecessarily. Here too, I think we were just sort of trying to make observations as to how the castings look, and I guess just their general amount relative to how much bedding still remains. I think in most cases I've seen sufficient remnants of bedding to make me think that these guys are still going to be okay for a little while longer. But on the flip side, as far as what they're getting today, I think they're going to appreciate it. They're going to have just so much more space to roam around in. So I'm looking at how much leftover bedding material I've still got over there. I'm thinking I might be left over. Well, I might have a little bit left over, but maybe not too much if we're playing our cards right here and being super generous, and that's certainly what I'm trying to do here. Once again, this one is going to be the oddball who gets the grape stem instead of the tomato stem. I don't think the worms are going to complain. I just think it might be interesting for them to have something a little different than just paper and cardboard to and leaves to, you know, crawl around in and rub up against. Sometimes I wonder if it's just that, you know, the roughness, coarseness of something that they tend to like. So it's right there is pretty much is all we're after. Let's backfill and press on. We're almost done. This is bucket number 4. Yeah, see, now I'm starting to wonder if I've got to be careful not to use too much here to make sure I leave enough for the last bucket, but I think we're going to be in good shape here. As I deplete what's in this tub over here, it kind of gives me a good sense of accomplishment to say, hey, you know, whipped up a good 6 or 7 gallons, probably 6 gallons of prepared bedding there. Very dense with leaves in this batch, so I was very generous with leaves in this stuff. Probably, what's the ratio? I would have to guess somewhere around 1 part leaves for each 2 parts of shredded paper and cardboard, all dampened thoroughly, kind of dampened by being submerged. So it was flooded. First the bucket that I was working in was just flooded with some water, and then in came the bedding materials, and I pushed it all down to the point where the bottom bits had soaked enough moisture in that I can now start tilling that into the rest of the material, and it all got really nice and damp pretty quickly. So on to the final bucket. Let's go bucket 5. Yep, huge difference in weight. when you lift one of these that hasn't gotten this couple handfuls worth of bedding upgrade. And we're almost done. Man, this feels good. It's something I've been wanting to do in these systems for quite some time now. And they've certainly deserved it. These poor little guys have just been cooped up in this relatively small space down in these buckets. I guess there was a little bit of a side story going on here too, something that was really never even mentioned, I don't think, in any of my videos about this set of systems. But I did have a little bit of an outbreak of little flying insects coming and going out of this stuff, to the point where I started really treating the stuff with, and pretty thoroughly, with the mosquito dunks solution. And that stuff does usually seem to do away with the gnats and the fruit flies, the types of flying insects that sometimes like to move into my worm bins, and luckily I don't think I've seen any. Knock on wood. Hopefully don't jinx myself by saying something like that, but luckily I've not seen too many, if any, flying insects near these buckets over the past few check-ins. Okay, man. It feels so good to have done away with all that pumpkin, all this bedding we prepared, even these stems that I've been collecting for such a long time, thinking we need a interesting place to deploy them. Now we've got it. Now we've got the interesting bucket series here that's not really received much publicity here on my channel. I think that was just sort of deliberate, you know, because I wasn't sure where we were going to go with things on these, whether they were even successful in the you know, in the role of breeding buckets. I do not know. But if we were successful, at least we're giving them plenty of room for their babies to move into once they start hatching from their cocoons. So, I don't know. That was the only thing, I guess, is that I just never really got the sense that I was observing many, if any, cocoons piling up in these systems. So, who knows? Maybe what we did here today, increasing the available space that they have to live in, maybe that's all they needed, and maybe things will change. Maybe they'll start mating and trying to make more baby worms for us. So, trying to remember now, did we get everything in here? Yeah, I think so. That's all I've got. I mean, I've got my box of prepared bedding behind me on the shelf, because I'm not too keen on that little piece of pumpkin peeking out over there, but I think we would have probably come up a little bit higher if I had any more, but we've basically used it all. It's perfect. It's exactly what we're trying to accomplish here today. Divvy out all of this prepared bedding that we made for them. Everything that was in the bucket over there, or the tub over there, with the yummy pumpkin stems, and even some tomato stems. But that's it for today's video, everyone. All I've got left to do here is get things covered up and put away, but you know, that stuff's pretty boring. I don't want to waste your time with that. Before I go there really quick, let me just say thank you. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go, if my hand is even visible in here. And that's really appreciated. And also, if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone, thanks for watching. Have a great day. Bye now.